A standoff between a man who is wanted by the FBI and a large number of federal agents.
Surrounding a cabin where a fugitive named Randy Weaver is holed up with his family.
In 1992, a bloody standoff between lawmen and an armed white separatist named Randy Weaver left his wife, 14-year-old son, and a federal agent dead.
They killed his dog, then his son, and then his wife, shot while holding her baby. Not by strangers, but by their own government. And the deadliest weapon at Ruby Ridge wasn't the rifle. It was the story that followed. A story that lit a spark. A spark still dividing America today, even now.
For months, federal agents' eyes were on the cabin and compound of the Weavers. But what many believed was the beginning of the modern militia movement actually came on the heels of a boy following his dog on August 21st, 1992.
This video uncovers Ruby Ridge, the siege that sparked America's modern extremism and a deep distrust of government. Because what happened in 1992 wasn't just about one family. It changed how millions saw their country.
The two men are on their way to a ramshackle cabin at the top of the hill where Randy Weaver, his family, and a friend have been holed up for nearly a week following a shootout with government agents.
You'll see how a missed court date became a national firestorm, and how the story told afterward mattered more than the bullets. Ruby Ridge wasn't just about the Weavers. It became a battlefield of stories. To federal agents, it was a dangerous fugitive.
Now, Weaver was an Army veteran turned survivalist and caught the attention of authorities for his connections to the Aryan nations. While serving the warrant, a shootout erupted between agents and members of the Weaver family, killing Weaver's 14-year-old son and a federal agent.
To militias, it was proof the government would kill women and children.
Really, within 15 minutes, Vicki Weaver would be dead, and Kevin Harris would be shot, and the entire thing, which should have been easily settled, would just simply blow up.
And out of those two versions of truth came something far bigger, something far more dangerous than a siege in the woods. That split story leapt to Waco. It exploded in Oklahoma City, and it still divides America today. August 21st, 1992. U.S. Marshals crept through the timber above the Weaver cabin. They were there to arrest Randy Weaver, wanted on a gun charge after skipping a court date, but the silence of the mountains didn't last. The Weaver's yellow Labrador, Striker, barked and charged. A marshal opened fire. The dog dropped.
Mistakes, miscommunications, and overreactions all led to the tragedy that we are examining today. They all contributed to the deaths of Randy Weaver's 14-year-old son Sam, his wife Vicki, and one of the Marshal Service's most highly decorated officers, Bill Deegan. The sad story of Ruby Ridge does not end with these deaths, or with Mr. Weaver's surrender, or even with his acquittal on all the major charges against him. There are serious allegations that high-ranking federal officials attempted to cover up the true story of Ruby Ridge, and there are rumors of destroyed documents and perjured statements.
14-year-old Sammy Weaver screamed in rage. He raised his rifle. He fired back.
What we do know is that U.S. Deputy Marshal Bill Deegan and Randy Weaver's 14-year-old son both died in that exchange. It was the beginning of an 11-day standoff at Ruby Ridge.
Seconds later, another shot. Sammy was hit in the back, dead before he hit the ground.
And Tom, this is a fascinating but also a disturbing story. Over the next several nights, we'll take you inside the hearts and minds of Indiana militia members. These are Hoosiers who believe the federal government is trying to enslave us all. Hoosiers who are convinced open warfare is imminent. We'll introduce you to Hoosiers preparing for war. Tonight, an overview of our 5-part investigation, Patriot Powder Keg.
Family friend Kevin Harris returned fire. U.S. Marshal William Deegan fell dead.
While serving the warrant, a shootout erupted between agents and members of the Weaver family, killing Weaver's 14-year-old son and a federal agent.
In under a minute, Ruby Ridge went from a surveillance operation to a firefight, and the tragedy had only just begun. One boy, one marshal, both dead. But the next shot would tear this story wide open. The day after the first blood, the government escalated. The FBI's hostage rescue team was called in. Their orders shockingly clear. Shoot any armed adult male on sight. It was called the rules of engagement, but in reality, it was a license to kill.
And in the end, it's a civilian. It's not an FBI agent. It's not anybody associated with the federal government or the state government who negotiates a settlement.
On August 22nd, FBI sniper Lon Horiuchi took aim. Randy Weaver was hit in the arm, but when Vicki Weaver stepped into the doorway, holding her 10-month-old baby, the bullet struck her in the head. She collapsed instantly.
Also hit Vicki Weaver. She was standing behind the cabin door, holding her 10-month-old baby when Harris ran in.
Her baby in her arms, her family watching. And with that shot, Ruby Ridge became something far bigger than a standoff. It became a symbol.
Ruby Ridge has become synonymous with tragedy, given the deaths there of a decorated Deputy United States Marshal, a young boy, and a boy's mother. It has also become synonymous with the exaggerated application of federal law enforcement. Both conclusions seem justified. At Ruby Ridge, the FBI did not perform at the level which the American people expect or deserve from their FBI.
To some, government force at its most dangerous. To others, a tragic but necessary act to end an armed standoff. But the truth was, Ruby Ridge was no longer about facts. It was about whose version of the story would survive. For 11 days, the cabin stood surrounded. Snipers on the hills, agents hidden in the trees. Inside, 3 children huddled over their mother's body. The images shocked the world. But what shocked people more was the narrative that followed.
The days that followed,
it's gonna happen to us all!
Saw more confrontations outside the perimeter of Ruby Ridge, as dozens of protesters.
This is not Aryan Nation stuff!
The government told one story, a dangerous fugitive tied to white supremacists refusing to surrender.
Weaver eventually surrendered to authorities and was acquitted by a jury on the felony weapons charges that started the siege in the first place.
But for militias and sympathizers, another story took hold. A family targeted. A mother murdered in cold blood.
Michael Johnson was a U.S. Marshal at the time, the law enforcement agency responsible for bringing Randy Weaver in. You see, Weaver was wanted on a federal firearm charge. He sold 2 sawed-off shotguns to a federal informant who was looking for information about the Aryan Nation based nearby in Idaho's Panhandle. Weaver refused to show up in court.
Proof, they said, that Washington was at war with its own people. 2 stories, same event. And the space between them was where extremism began to grow. Because once Ruby Ridge was framed not as a tragedy, but as a symbol, it stopped being just history. It became fuel. Before we go deeper, this is the Shadow Chronicle archive. If you value stories that cut past headlines and dig into the shadows of history, hit subscribe. Because what happened at Ruby Ridge is only the beginning. Just months after Ruby Ridge, flames rose in Waco, Texas. Another siege, another standoff between federal agents and a religious group called the Branch Davidians. 76 people died in that fire, and for militia leaders, the connection was clear. Ruby Ridge had been the warning. Waco was the proof.
911, what's your emergency?
There's 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
The story of government tyranny spread faster than the flames. Pamphlets, radio broadcasts, rallies, and 3 years later, it reached Oklahoma City. Timothy McVeigh, the bomber who killed 168 people, carried Waco pamphlets in his car. And in interviews, he pointed to Ruby Ridge and Waco as his reasons for war. One siege, one fire, and one bombing that shook America's heartland. The spark from Ruby Ridge had become a firestorm. Decades later, the echoes still remain. You can hear them in militia movements, in conspiracy theories, and in the chants at political rallies.
You know what I hope people take away from this is that all these could have been prevented if Randy Weaver just would have showed up in court. Nobody wanted to go up there and kill anybody. We just needed to have him show up in court.
To the government, Ruby Ridge is remembered as a failure of tactics.
These are Americans. These are God-fearing people. You don't even know your Constitution. Go back and read what your founding fathers said.
To extremists, it's remembered as a rallying cry. The truth? Both stories are still alive, and America is still divided over which one it believes. Ruby Ridge was never just about a cabin in the mountains. It was about two powers colliding, and the battle to control the story of what happened there. The FBI called it law enforcement. Militias called it tyranny. And in the cracks between those versions of truth, an anti-government movement took root.
I would never conclude that any operation that resulted in the death of anyone is a successful operation. And I would not conclude that this operation was not without its faults, just the difficulty that we have in terms of the communication of the rules of engagement and the clear misunderstanding that existed as to what rules of engagement were in effect, I think shows that.
The lesson is clear. Stories can kill. Because once a tragedy becomes a symbol, it stops being history. It becomes fuel for the future. And if Ruby Ridge showed us how competing stories can divide a nation, next week, we go deeper into how those stories are built. The 7 dark psychology tricks cult leaders use, the same tactics that fuel extremism, manipulate belief, and keep people trapped in dangerous movements, even today. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden psychology of power and control, subscribe to the Shadow Chronicle archive. Join us every week as we reveal more. Because the more you understand control, the harder it is for anyone to control you.
I don't know that Randy Weaver knew at the time that they moved to Ruby Ridge that they would be so close to the Aryan Nations compound, which was just 60 miles south. But they started showing up. At first, it was purely social. They attended family picnics and those kinds of things. But as Randy began to interact more with them, he started to buy into the message.